All right, everybody. Here's what we got going on today's episode. Joe makes a trip across the pond to go visit with Man City. Payton Pritchard and Derrick White FaceTime Blake Griffin. And then Draymond Green does what Draymond Green does. He's got something to say about JT. So we're going to check in with that. We got you all covered here on Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. And today it is a three-man weave edition. This is your boy Will. We are checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, first up, we got the coach of the podcast, my best friend, the one and only Greg Menakis. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm drinking some like magnesium. I think it's called like magnesium glycerate or something like that. It was prescribed to my pregnant fiance, Danielle, to kind of help with her insomnia at night, but it also has like anti-anxiety properties in it. And I'm trying it out. And as I was about to take my second sip, I saw a very large hair that is still in there. And I need to get that out of my drink.
All right. Well, that's one update for those of you at home that are listening to this podcast. So hopefully that's gonna get Greg through here. And then on the other side of me, I have our podcasting cousin from across the pond, the lead writer for Celtics blog, and of course, the leader of the Taylor gang. It's the one Adam Taylor. What's
popping? What's popping?
I mean, what's popping is probably hairs in Greg's drink. That's one thing. I don't know if it's his own hair. We've yet to discover.
It's my dog. It's my dog Billy. It's I think
dog
what it
hair
is.
in drinks, baby.
I tried to stir the drink with my finger because I saw some of like the powder still floating, and I think like because I was just petting Billy, I put the hair into the drink when I stirred it with my finger. So just use a spoon, everybody.
Well, so here's a question.
Do you call carbonated drinks pop? Talking of popping, I know some places around the States use pop for like sodas and shit.
Yeah, it's just soda water.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my parents might have used that interchangeably when I was younger. Maybe they might have said pop every now and then, but yeah, it's just like so you call soda pop, like not soda pop, but just pop, right?
Yeah, so like some place, like I don't really. I kind of
Coke.
Yeah, I kind of use the brand name. I'm like, do you want some Coke? Do you want some Fanta and shit? But yeah, I know that, like, you know, here and over there, some people use the word pop to describe soda. So we always say what's popping. I wanted to see whether or not there was a background to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely more of a Britishism than it is probably used here in the States for sure. But I know that there are pockets of the United States where that could be.
Yeah, probably. I've seen like graphs, like maps on Twitter where people are like, it's called pop, it's called soda, it's called Coke, and all carbonated drinks are just Coke. You want a Coke? Yeah, it comes. It's fucking orange and it's Fanta, and you're like, this isn't Coke.
Yeah, the Boston boys, you know, we just call it soda.
Yeah, it's just soda, but yeah, I feel like soda pop was like a older term, so could be used a little bit here and there. But while we're talking about trips across the pond and what do you call one thing or another, that brings us into our first topic of the day. So today we wanted to talk about Joe Mazzulla, who got a chance over the All-Star break to go visit with Manchester City's Pep Guardiola, I believe I'm saying that correct, who has been long an idol of Joe Mazzulla. And just so for those of you listening or watching want to kind of follow along a little bit, Jared Weiss of The Athletic is the one that wrote this up and gave us some really great insight into Joe's trip across the pond, in which we were able to all learn a little bit more about Joe's philosophies and why Joe is the way he is, because let's just be honest, he's a fascinating individual, a sicko, a psycho, as a lot of people have described him in different ways. And we get a little bit more, peel back that onion just a little bit more. So we wanted to dig into this article a little bit and tell you about some of the takeaways that we had. So Adam, I want to start with you because there's two things. Number one, have you recovered that Mazzulla came to England and didn't hit you up? And number two, what was your most interesting takeaway, or what was the thing that you learned new about Joe Mazzulla from this article?
Number one, no. I'm very, very insulted that somebody that has no idea I exist didn't hit me up and ask me to come and, you know, just do some jiu-jitsu or maybe grab a burger or, you know, play some one-on-one so he can see.
Maybe some pop.
Get some pop. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, a little insulted, you know. Okay, I'm very insulted. I'm a bit sad. It was the same when Grant Williams went to Chelsea, I think about 18 months ago. Like, dude, just shoot me a message, man. I'm around. I drive. I can get there. And Manchester's not far. It's far enough, but it's not far. In terms of philosophy, I just thought that it was I'm very big on innovation. Like, I like the idea of kind of being like, if you can find an advantage by doing something that not everybody's doing. And one of the things Jared Weiss put in the article that really stood out to me was like, during the 3-point revolution, teams started moving away from the post because they're like, hey, it's not that effective in terms of points per possession as if you're got good 3-point shooters. And that's kind of come full circle now to whereas playing in the post and then generating threes out has kind of become a counter to the 3-point movement within itself. It's kind of done this weird full circle, and Mazzulla's at the forefront of that. The way he's using that transitional, like in soccer, and I hate the fact we're talking about soccer right now. In soccer, everything's transitional, right? You're on offense, you're on defense, you're defending from the front. So you take your shot, you don't try and get back, you start defending from the box, from where the goalkeeper is, and then you build your defense based off the front foot. That's kind of like the Guardiola, the Jurgen Klopp type of defensive system that's kind of swept through Europe. And you can see that in terms of like, it's like a press, right? That's the best way to put it. It's like the soccer version of a press. And you can kind of see that with the way that Mazzulla's got his team playing. Like, you'll have some guys tracking back. The pickup points are pretty high for the most part. Guys are getting picked up around the logo, around the half court line. Then you've got a 2-1-2 press. So he is kind of implementing some of these soccer principles and mentalities a bit more frequently than what we see other people. So I just like the innovation. I like the looking for an advantage where others haven't. Leave no stone unturned. I do not like that I wasn't there when this occurred, and I could have, you know, we could have kicked it for 20 minutes. I'm a bit disappointed, Joe. If you're listening to this, you need to make it right, man. And I have.
Well, hey, I mean, you should have hit him up and let him know. Well, for one, have you hit him up and let him know that you train jiu-jitsu too? Because I feel like you guys could just like bond over that.
No, I haven't. Like, so when I was in Boston, there was like a whole political thing happening. I think somebody got hurt in Memphis. If I remember correctly, it was like some police brutality stuff, and Joe was speaking.
Unfortunately,
on, like,
this happens so often I don't fully recall, but I vaguely recall.
Yeah, and like I was kind of in a whirlwind myself, so I don't remember the person's name, and I think that's kind of shitty of me not to, because it was such a prevalent thing at the time. But at the same time, like, when it was the press conference and Joe was giving his opinion, like not his opinion, but like he was kind of using his platform to speak for change. The last thing I felt like was worthwhile was me kind of popping up, being like, "Hey," you know. So I kept my mouth shut, and that was really the only opportunity I got to interact with him. So
and we just gotta plant that bug in his ear, because
I might speak
do
to Jared.
Yeah, you should speak to Jared. Let him know. But I mean,
what we got to do is mix it in with a town quote as well too. If you can combine the town along with your jiu-jitsu, I think we have a match.
It's amazing that this article doesn't reference the town.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that we like all know about Joe Mazzulla. But no, I mean, my takeaways from this article, one, I think the high level takeaway is like the level of I just like eccentricity, but also the depth with which Joe Mazzulla kind of has taken a dive into what being a coach is. Like, this is who he is. It's his 100% authentic self as a basketball coach and is a coach. So I do really like that, because we don't have somebody kind of manning the helm that's just a casual, right? Joe Mazzulla is really about that life. He wants to be a coach. This is all he wants to do, is just kind of like be that leader and use, you know, all of his interests in order to inform his philosophy as a coach and as a human being, which is really cool. And I liked, you know, the little tidbits where they had the quotes from Al Horford, and they talked about how Mazzulla showed them a game of soccer, which I thought was really cool, just so that he could then try and have his players understand the way that he sees the game. Because it did seem like he was having a hard time kind of letting that message sink in and let that translate and kind of sink in with the team to see what his philosophy is. So sometimes you just got to be like, you know what, I can't really say it right now, or the words that I'm using isn't resonating with you. Let's just watch this together, and then we can talk about it, which is, you know, when I'm a coach, Back in the day, I coached high school for 10 years. And one thing that I always loved to do was film sessions, and even when I was a coach for teachers, I would like help teachers become better teachers. That was my job for a few years. And I was all into game tape. We would just like film a class and we'd sit there and we'd watch it together. And I'd just be like, tell me what you see. And it does seem like that Mazzulla kind of uses that same principle to show his guys the way that he views the game.
Yeah, it's another good example of just Joe finding his voice, right? Which he, last year, because and this article references again, it was so rushed, it was so chaotic. There just wasn't the proper time for him to get all of the things that come with being a coach. I like the way that you put it, Greg, like not just the X's and O's, but like my own philosophy of being a coach and what I believe that means. And then one of the other things I thought was funny in the article was, of course, last year, one of the biggest points of contention with Joe Mazzulla was his use of timeouts or lack thereof timeouts. Here's my favorite quote. I'm just going to read it directly from the article here. And this is from Joe Mazzulla. That's where my timeout philosophy started. I think soccer coaches are the best teachers because once the game starts, you can't call a timeout. The ability to create a system where your guys can operate and function based on the ebbs and flow of the game and how the game is going is really important. You have to empower your players to understand exactly how the game's going and how quickly you can self-correct to either stop a run or create your own run, which is something he actually just recently talked about in a quote maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. But I thought this was so funny because, one, it gives you, once again, we're peeling the layers back on what's inside the mind of Joe Mazzulla. He may not have known he could have called timeouts last year. He thought it was soccer. That's the first thing that comes away from it. He was just coaching the wrong sport last year. He wasn't sure what the hell was going on. But it does give you a glimpse into what his thought process was, right? Like, this gives you a further understanding of how he looked at when I become, because the beginning of this article talks about he had always envisioned being a head coach at some point, not as soon as it happened. And that this guy's style, Pep, who I'll be honest, I know nothing about Man City other than they were Jamie Tartt's father's favorite team, and they were kind of the foil in Ted Lasso. That's about it. That's
Best
the
team in
extent.
Europe right now. In all of
Okay,
Europe.
I know they're a good team, but yeah, that's about all I know. But from this coach that holds such a high regard for Joe Mazzulla, to see him really kind of dig in and be able to connect the dots on what those soccer philosophies are, how they translate to basketball, I just think it's really interesting to start to understand what goes on behind the scenes with a guy like Joe Mazzulla, who we were dying for more of this last year. But once again, it was all rushed. It was condensed. No one had the proper context to be able to work with.
I just don't like the fact he's using soccer. Couldn't we have done hockey, rugby, football, like American football, like knows pool, snooker? Like, could we just have used something? Like, I don't care what did it have?
Well,
to
I
be
mean, here's the other thing. He grew up playing soccer in Rhode Island, right? So that's a part of it. It's just being able for him to make that connection. And listen, I don't really fully understand soccer, but I do have season tickets to the Austin FC team here out in Austin, Texas. I go to 4 or 5 games a year, and in between, where I mostly just go for the vibes and to have a good time, the times that I do actually watch, I completely just treat it like a basketball game. I just look at the spacing. I don't really understand who's supposed to be where, but I know as far as working from the outside in, inside out, where guys are cutting to draw defenders away. That's entirely the way my mind is working for the 15 minutes out of a 90-minute game that I'm actually focusing on what's happening on the pitch. But anything else you guys have from this article?
Yeah, I think just like the overall idea of advantage basketball, that's something
Right.
I've been talking a lot about this year with Derrick White, right? I've said a few times on the pod that Derrick White is one of the best basketball players at playing advantage basketball. So it was just kind of cool to see that come up in the article multiple times. They talk about creating those advantages and how you create those advantages and the fluidity within the game between offense and defense, and how it's all interconnected. And to see the different players, they had a quote from Jaylen Brown, and they talked about when they were talking about the post ups and how Jaylen now understands that, creating the advantage for himself is one thing, but how do you create the advantage for teammates? And that's something that even on the most recent Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo podcast that they did, they talking about Jaylen Brown and Russillo, who normally I like his takes on basketball, talking about how Jaylen's out there doing his own thing and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't really see that. What I see is Jaylen Brown learning how to play within the system and to see it really sinking in that this is what he's trying to do. And he's now an extension of his coach's philosophy. And I think you do see that a lot with everybody on the court now. They are understanding the way that Joe Mazzulla sees the game, and they're trying to implement it, right? It's not just square peg round hole this year. Everything that they're doing is fluid. It's a dance, and they all understand that there's advantages all around the court. How do we create those advantages? Is it a cross match in transition? Is it playing out of the post? Is it a Derrick White empty side pick and roll with Porzingis, to put pressure on the defense, bend the defense one way, and then pass the ball to the other side? They talk about the tiki-taka thing that Pep does, passing the ball back and forth in soccer. Like you see a lot of that side-to-side action that the Celtics are trying to get within the game. So creating those advantages was something that really stuck out to me. And I like reading this article because now I can now look for more things as I'm watching the games. We talked about how the Celtics up 7.5 games, 8 games over the rest of the Eastern Conference. There's not a whole lot new that we can say. So having an article like this just gives me a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of refresh my perspective on the way that I'm watching the games, which I thought is cool. Good article, Jared.
The one thing I want to add is just he couldn't have picked a better coach to try and learn from. Pep's had success everywhere. Like in Spain, he had that Barcelona team when Messi was playing and they were ridiculously good. Then he moves to Germany for Bayern Munich. They destroy it. They're absolutely dominant. Then he moves. They didn't win in Europe though. Then he moves to Man City, and now they're the best team in Europe. Like you don't win consistently everywhere you go unless you're elite as a coach, right? You can be successful in one situation if you kind of because Guardiola kind of inherited that Barcelona team the same way as Joe inherited the Celtics team. The pieces were all there. It was just his philosophy took them from being like here, I'm not on the camera there, like here, and took them up to here. And that's kind of what Mazzulla's trying to do. He inherited a team and he spoke about this in the article as well. He was like, look, when we came in, there was a system. I'm not saying it was rigid, but it was kind of rigid. And I've tried to break that habit. So he's trying to follow that similar evolution. So he couldn't have picked a better coach to emulate. I just don't want to have to start watching soccer so that.
Well, I was going to say, Adam, it's really interesting. You're saying that you hate soccer, and then you just gave us the last
give us a history
10
lesson.
years of this guy's career. And
I mean, dude, it's like
probably unavoidable, but
yeah, it's literally everywhere. I could load up a newspaper website right now, and the headline will be for soccer. Like, there's nothing I can do to get away with it. So I'm very aware of who these guys are and what they do and who's top of what. But it's not like I go search.
You're aware, but you're not happy about how aware you are.
And this is why I need to move. This is the whole point I've been trying to make. It's just I've never had to speak. Like, dude, I go to the gym. It's a soccer discussion. I go to the bar. It's a soccer discussion. It's just if you don't at least know and you can pretend that you watch a bit, then
you're basically
not gonna have friends. And I'm just like, so yeah.
Well,
but
here's one last question. One last question I have for you guys on this, and this is kind of moving away from the article a little bit, but do you guys think that Joe Mazzulla needs to get a little bit more consideration for Coach of the Year? So right now, I just pulled it up here just to kind of run through the odds. And we don't got to go too deep into this, but I am curious to get your guys' take on it here. Right now, Mark Daigneault with the Thunder is the clubhouse leader. Now, this article is from about a week ago, so this may have changed. Forgive me, but this is from Vegas Insider right now. But Mark Daigneault's at plus 180, Chris Finch plus 250, JB Bickerstaff plus 400, Tyronn Lue plus 600, Rick Carlisle plus 1400, and then Joe Mazzulla here in sixth at plus 2100. So sixth place right now. And I'm not saying that he even deserves to win, but I just feel like I'm curious to know, do you think as we get towards the end of the year here, it's been a pretty dominant run in the regular season here for the Celtics, as we've talked about, does Joe Mazzulla deserve a little bit more pub as potentially being the Coach of the Year? What do you think, Greg?
I think, the sixth best odds is probably about right, considering how much of a disaster last year was in terms of the media perception of Joe Mazzulla, and then when you look at the top two, right, that's the Thunder coach and the Wolves coach, two teams that are drastically outperforming expectations. Right. And when you're given this much talent and you have a roster, just like Tatum is kind of the victim of his own success, like Mazzulla is going to be the victim of the talent that Brad Stevens has given him. So I I would say that maybe articles like Jared's article that he just posted might start to shift that narrative just a little bit more. So people are seeing that, oh, it's not just Joe Mazzulla coaching a bunch of all-stars. It's Joe Mazzulla imprinting his own philosophy on the style of play that these all-stars are now finding beneficial to their own success and the team's success. So I think this could be the first step towards, 2 weeks from now, maybe those odds shift to Mazzulla's 4th instead of 6th.
The only guy I've really got an issue with being above Mazzulla, and this is just because team success, same conference, and all that, is Bickerstaff. I think that Mazzulla, I understand Bickerstaff's done a great job with Cleveland this year, but Mazzulla's done a better job, and he's probably had it harder because he's got more egos to manage, more talent to get to buy in and start pulling in that same direction. And I understand the overachieving with a roster, but I think we don't give coaches enough credit for achieving with so much talent and getting got. It's the same with Ty Lue. That's why, he's probably got it tougher because he's got veterans, like real established egos with upon ego.
Hall of Famers.
He got Westbrook was the one Hall of Famers. Westbrook volunteers to go to the bench. You don't do that unless you have trust in the system and the leadership of the team. You're keeping Harden happy, Kawhi happy, PG happy. Zubac isn't exactly a star, but he's a true vet. He's happy. Like those teams, to me, making it work with that amount of talent is more impressive than making it work with a bunch of younger guys with one or true stars that you've built around, and then everyone, like, because everyone's just following that star's trail, right? It's like a comet. Everyone's just in the tail of Donovan Mitchell and going wherever JB points Donovan, everyone follows.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more difficult for Ty and Joe. There we go, Ty and Joe. So yeah, I think that's the only one I got an issue with is Bickerstaff.
Yeah, I mean, I think for an award like this is just there's two paths to winning this award. Either it's you're overachieving based on expectations coming into the season, or you're just utterly dominant. Those are kind of the two paths to winning this. So I think ultimately, if the Wolves and Thunder keep it up and they're in the 1-2 conversation in the West, that probably stays the same for Mazzulla. I think he'll find a way if the Celtics continue on this path to get into that top 3, and then ultimately it becomes, if the Celtics, let's just say hypothetically, lose 3 more games the rest of the season, end up with I think that would be like a 66-15 record. They end up with something crazy like that. Then it becomes, all right, this is so dominant and based off, to your point, Greg, the narrative being corrected from what it was a year ago to what it is now. That's kind of the path for Joe, and it's certainly on the table. So I think Joe will give it a run, but that'll be something we can talk about a little bit more as we get to the end of the season. But to pivot here, let's go to another media source here, and Payton Pritchard and Derrick White made an appearance on Part of My Take earlier this week, where they had a conversation with Big Cat and PFT commenter, and it was a fun conversation. Those guys are always having a good time, especially if you're looking for the view outside of the analytics. That is definitely the place to go if you want to enjoy that type of conversation. And one of the things that came up that I think really stood out to me was Blake Griffin has, had long time been a friend of that particular podcast. And so they started talking about Blake Griffin's time with the Celtics. And I feel like this really opened up the floor. I felt like in the interview, Big Cat and PFT were really trying to lean in to get Payton Pritchard and Derrick White to open up as much as they could possibly get them to. Blake Griffin seemed to really be that lightning rod for it. These guys absolutely lit up when they started talking about Blake Griffin. Big Cat then FaceTime Blake Griffin into the conversation, which was really fun. And what was revealed in this conversation is that, Brad Stevens was in contact with Blake Griffin, up until probably around the start of the season. Blake said, I'm going to take some time with my family. Brad's kind of left it be, but the players on the bench have still been kind of chiming in with Blake Griffin, seeing if he wants to come back, poking the bear a little bit, seeing if he would want to come in for that 15 spot. So, we do have one open roster spot here, Greg. Blake Griffin seems to be the all-time vibes guy here based on what we're getting from Payton Pritchard and Derrick White. Any interest in Blake being that guy? I don't know what he's going to bring on the court, but any interest in bringing him in here as a vibes guy?
Yeah, I mean, if they're not going to fill that roster with someone who might offer a little bit more versatility on the wing, then why not? I mean, you might as well bring the good vibes. This team has such great vibes. The last thing you want to do is bring in a 15th guy who might not fit with the way that the personality of the team has kind of grown together this year. Even Porzingis, who has been kind of a malcontent at some other places he's gone, has fit right in, and everybody loves him. He's smiling, he's having a good time. He seems like genuinely just like a really fun hang. And that's what Blake Griffin is at this point, right? Yeah. He's just a fun hang. And I didn't get a chance to listen to that podcast yet or watch the video of it yet, so I'm just kind of taking your word for what you're saying about it. But I do think that if we're not going to bring in someone who could actually play a role over a Brissett or a Hauser or somebody like that, and or Jordan Walsh, if like they want Jordan Walsh to be that guy, then yeah, why not?
I like the fact that Blake Griffin's fun. No, jokes aside, I think that that when they got Tillman, that was kind of my acceptance that Griffin wasn't coming back. Right, I think I assume somebody's kind of put a feeler out there to see where Blake's at in headspace. Would you come back? Tillman obviously gives you a little bit of future proofing as well. Blake could be just for this run. But I do like the idea of giving a vet a chance to win a ring. I know that I don't know if any of you saw it, but Isaiah Thomas kind of threw his hat into the ring the other day during a conversation with some fans.
His hat is always in the ring, whether it's him or it's Celtics fans. His name will. I actually am curious. How old does Isaiah Thomas have to get before his name is not in the ring? As far as at least somebody throwing it out there to bring Isaiah.
I'd say
Thomas
at least 54. At least.
Okay. 54. I'm gonna give you guys 3 options here. You have to pick one of them. The 15th spot is filled by either Blake Griffin, Isaiah Thomas, or Paul Pierce.
He says he can still get a bucket. He's been very adamant he could still hit a corner 3. Oof, that's a good. Adam, if you have an answer, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'll go Thomas. Pierce already has a ring. I feel like if you're gonna honor somebody, you do it for Thomas because what he meant to the franchise, and he ain't really got to do shit. Unfortunately, if Blake's going to get a ring, in my opinion, he should be the end of bench guy for the Clippers because that's kind of where he really made his name. So I'd much rather it be IT than Pierce because Pierce already has the ring, and I don't want to have to hear him talk about strippers for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that right there is why I'm Xing out Pierce. I don't want him bringing his because he doesn't give a shit, right? He's not actually going to play. I don't need him bringing the team along to help them celebrate their Game 3 victory to wherever Paul wants to go. The team doesn't need to go there. Let's be very clear about that. So I think for me, we come down to Isaiah and Blake. I'll go Blake just because the Bus One boys, like the vibes are still there from the Bus One boys. So for me, it's more just Blake has left, but he hasn't left the group chat that's actually on this team yet. Like that's one of the things that became very apparent in the interview. He's still very much in the group chat. Isaiah Thomas hasn't played with, I think maybe he crossed over with Jaylen Brown, but that'd be the only, and Al. Jaylen and Al are going to be the only connections that Isaiah Thomas has to this team. So I'm going to go with Blake Griffin because he's already got the connections and the vibes. But I like this question though, Greg. Who would you go with?
Yeah, I'd go with Blake. I think Isaiah, he still has something to prove. And like whoever we bring into the 15th spot can't have anything to prove at this point. And I think that's Blake Griffin. He's done everything he needs to do. The ring would just be the icing on the cake for him with his career. And the Pierce thing obviously was a joke.
I want to throw in Brandon Bass's name just because I feel like Brandon Bass deserves to get a mid-range bucket.
I was trying to think of like who, like if we could just choose anyone for that 15th spot, kind of like Greg's question and the Brandon Bass answer as well. Like could be just anybody. Like I was trying to think of a good name for it. Brandon Bass is one that definitely I was not expecting a Brandon Bass answer from Adam today. Is Brandon Bass just hold like a soft spot in your heart, or what's the Brandon Bass love?
Yeah, it's just that old school mid-range game, right? Like he was just, and he's a true vet. I liked him when he was.
What I liked about Brandon Bass's mid-range game? He was full vertical every time he shot. He was 36 inches off the ground for every single shot.
It was just a straight line. It didn't even need arc, dude. And like if you follow him on Instagram, like he just spends his time fishing now. Like with his son, he's fishing, he's just living. I'm like, dude, that's what you want, right? You want to bring in like somebody that Al could be friends with. Give Al a friend for a minute. Give someone Al's age they can go like fishing together. And I'm down with Brandon Bass, or even just for the vibes. If you really want real vibes, we need to bring in Vitor Favorani. That's what we need to do.
I don't even know if I understand that one.
So that
Igor
again.
Averani. I don't even. I mean, I do remember him, but I don't even remember him as like I don't even know what he would bring or what type of vibes he's bringing.
His name was fun. That was pretty much a
It was a fun
Vitor.
name.
Like that was as
What
far
was
as I got.
what was the other foreign guy we had that recently?
The French guy, the tall French guy.
Yeah. What's his name? Why am I blanking? He had a hilarious nickname.
The big sexy. That's what I call it.
Something like that. Yeah.
It was
Why are we
Vincent
blanking
something,
right
wasn't
now?
it? Vincent.
Poirier.
Yeah.
Big sexy. Vincent Poirier. There we go. That's a nickname.
Is it like Sexy Pants? He called himself like
Sexy Pants.
Sex
Pants. That's what it was. Sex Pants. Vincent Poirier. There we go. That's what the collective 3-man weave brains bring to you. Sex Pants. Vincent Poirier. Back on the 15th. Back on the 15th
thank you.
spot. All right, let's hit one more topic here, and then we'll call it quits on this show here.
Just to throw it in there, why not Yabu?
Yabuselli, Brad Wanamaker.
Yabu.
If we're sticking with Frenchmen,
Greg, you still talking to his girlfriend?
Okay, let's give some context to that before you just throw that out there. I sat next to her at a game one time, and she talked to me the entire game. And I think it's his wife.
Fair enough.
Hey,
context matters. You're right. Context matters. That was a cheap shot for a laugh. That's all good. It's all good. All right, let's go on to our last topic here. And so to round this out here, obviously a big topic, which we've already touched on a bunch here, has been is Jayson Tatum an MVP candidate? Should he be in the top 5? Well, Draymond Green decided to weigh in, and I'm going to read a quote here. I'm not going to play the whole video. I'm just going to read a quote here from Draymond Green's podcast here of what he said. Draymond Green, Jayson Tatum will not be taken seriously for MVP until he wins a championship. It hasn't been that way for Jokic, Giannis, and Joel. I don't know how the goalpost moved on you like that, but they should acknowledge it. So Draymond Green in this is defending Jayson Tatum in the sense that he is being treated different than some of the other previous MVPs that we've seen, who didn't necessarily need to have the championship in hand. And Greg, you kind of referenced this earlier in one of your points where we were talking about, how much Jayson Tatum has already done in his career. This is where I think the goalposts are different for Jayson Tatum, fair or not, is the success that he has had in his young career. Remember, he turns 26 on Sunday. Not 26 yet. Happy early birthday, Jayson Tatum, but not even 26 yet. His resume, really, for me, it's not even just about should he be the MVP. It's just that he doesn't get the credit that I think he should be getting for the stature of player that he is. So, Greg, do you agree with Draymond that these goalposts just feel different for Tatum, whether it's fair or not? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole Tatum can't get it done in the playoffs thing, it's just people have very selective memories to fit their argument and fit their narrative, because you can find just as many games where Jayson Tatum was phenomenal in the playoffs as you can where he struggled. Because Tatum, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Tatum hasn't had bad games in the playoffs. He's had plenty of bad games in the playoffs, but he just has so many more opportunities to have bad games because his teams win. So you can't really hold that against him. And he's also had some of the best games I've ever seen in the playoffs and elimination games. For me, up until the finals against the Warriors, in my head, Jayson Tatum would always step up in a big game. Always. I was shocked when Tatum had 3 straight games where he was pretty terrible in the finals to close out that series, because I was like, oh, no, there's no way the Celtics are going to lose 3 games in a row and Jayson Tatum is going to have 3 bad games in a row. It just couldn't compute in my mind. I just felt like he was going to step up. That's kind of the player that we've all kind of known him to be. And then he didn't do it. In those 3 games, it was in the biggest stakes. So now all of a sudden, Jayson Tatum is not a big game player, which is just absolute horseshit. He absolutely is. And I agree with Draymond that he's going to have to win a championship to change the narrative. So fair or unfair, that's the stakes for Tatum. And I think he gets it done this year, man. I really feel like, barring any injury, the Celtics win a championship this year.
And then when they win a championship, I think he wins for NBA Finals MVP. And then I think everything changes for him from that moment. The downside is, what I really don't like is the fact that goalposts are being moved, and it's not just amongst fans, it's actually bled into the media, because these things matter in terms of contracts, in terms of, and obviously we know Tatum's going to be a supermax guy. Yeah, he's a supermax guy. But on the back end of his career, when he's trying to opt out of the final year of a deal when he's 33 and he wants one more big pay, having that MVP on your resume probably gets you closer to a max on your final contract than it does if you're not an MVP. Do you know what I mean? Just at the very back end of that deal, at the very back end of that career, you could probably lean on those type of accolades a bit more. So that's kind of where I sit with it. Like, I also don't think you should be moving the goalposts. It should be very set, clear criteria within a vacuum, obviously with context. And if you did that, Tatum should be top 3.
Well, here's
Tatum with
here's
Curls.
the thing, Adam. Like with the national media that talk about Jayson Tatum, how much of the Celtics do you think they're actually watching? Like
None.
we're sitting there and watching every single game. We're oftentimes watching it twice, sometimes 3 times to learn, from the film sessions, especially you, someone who covers the team at such an in-depth level. And then there's these guys that are more personalities than analysts at this point. And it's probably not fair that the criteria for being a voter is, these like a lot of these national media people that there's just not enough hours in the day to do the due diligence to be able to definitively say Jayson Tatum has improved or is not improved or doesn't do that, or Luka Doncic is better than him, which I think we all agree that Tatum's two-way impact has him over Luka any day of the week. But there's just like when all you're doing is looking at the box scores and all you're doing is looking at the highlights, I could see why the national media thinks Luka's a better player than Tatum. Like I totally get it, but they just don't watch enough basketball.
And I think, Adam, you said this. I think, he wins a championship. He wins the Celtics win championship. He wins NBA Finals MVP. It all changes. And I think this year in the postseason specifically, with the way this team is set up, I think his defense is going to start to get the appreciation that shifts it so that now it's not just, oh, his stats don't match up with what Jokic and Luka has, because I think he's recognized as a good defender, but not an elite defender. And we talked about this last episode, that I think when we look at a lot of the matchups that could potentially happen in this postseason, Tatum's going to be in the spotlight defense. He's been in the spotlight offensively already for years, and people know what he can do. And some people will back that. Some people will point to, Greg, as you pointed out, they'll look more into the faults than they will the highs, which I think is my biggest frustration, that he just doesn't get enough credit for the highs that he's had to go along with some of those lows. And I think this year, this is where we're going to see the flip, that he starts to be talked about defensively, and in just year in, year out, all NBA defender. Not just he's good. He's a two-way good defender, but that he's an all NBA defender. And I think that's going to be what flips this, as long as the Celtics have this, talent depth where he is able to sacrifice. Because if you put him, like if we just think about this, if we put him on OKC, there's 0% chance that Tatum is not averaging above 30 points. Does that feel correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he did it last year with a more talented team than OKC has right now.
That's what I'm saying. So I feel like, the respect that Tatum would get for sacrificing, like that's going to happen this postseason when he starts to get more respect for the level of defense that, to your point, we're seeing day in and day out, because we're watching every game, going through it with a fine-tooth comb. We're not just tuning in, once every couple of weeks, which, to your point, there's not enough time in the day to be able to really do, which is why I respect the hell out of some of these guys, like Steve Jones and others that, like, apparently they watch fucking 8 games a night and like break them all down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that's so, I don't know how you have the time to have a life, because that is really hard to do. That's why when those guys speak, I do tend to listen a little bit more, because I know the depth that they've gone to. But it's one of those narratives that isn't fair, but the only way to change it, and Tatum has said it just as much, just got to win the chip, got to go out and get it. And then that kind of resets everything, and it sets up, if the Celtics do actually, take home the championship this year, it sets up the potential of a very, very interesting run, not just for the Celtics, but for Jayson Tatum personally as well. Anything else you guys want to touch on today? I feel like we've kind of gone through the couple of topics that we were looking for, but anything else that you guys got before we wrap this up?
All good.
Adam, anything on your side of the pond?
They're gonna smash the Sixers, man.
Well, let's hope though. This podcast will come out after that game, so we'll know exactly what that result is. But it's a good point. We'll know more about that Sixers result. But that's gonna do it for this episode here of Green with Envy. As always, I'm your boy Will Weir. We got Greg Manakis, we got Adam Taylor. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the YouTube page. Follow us on all the social medias. Hit up the Celtics Chronicles. Join the Discord. And right now, we are gonna play you out with some Black Sheep Optimist, which of course is Greg's band down here in Austin, Texas. We will catch y'all later.
no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jayson Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating in your river. I caught